Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere a little damp, a little musky, a little forgotten by time. You're descending a narrow wooden staircase. The smell hits you first, earthy, fermented, like old grapes crushed beneath dusty boots. The light dims. You're not in your bedroom anymore. You're in a wine cellar. Not a fancy French one, not the kind with twinkling candlelight and polished glasses. No, this one's American, pioneer-built. A few cobwebs, barrels lined against the stone. A place where someone, once upon a time, curled up and slept, night after night, with nothing but pickled onions, root vegetables, and bottles of homemade blackberry wine for company. You're probably wondering, why? Why would anyone choose to sleep underground in a cold cellar meant for booze of preserves? That's exactly what we're going to explore tonight, in our slow, winding, sleepy kind of way. Because before HVAC systems, before ergonomic beds, and before people got picky about thread counts, there were the cellars, and the people who lived in them, and, more curiously, the ones who slept in them. Let's rewind to the 1830s, or maybe 1847. Pick any year where there were fewer paved roads and more goats than people. You're a settler. Maybe you've moved west for a patch of land. Maybe you've inherited a soggy field in upstate New York. Either way, the winters are brutal. The wind bites your ears off. The snow piles up to your chin. And insulation is something rich people in Boston talk about. You need somewhere warm, somewhere quiet, somewhere that won't kill you before spring. And lo and behold, you've got a wine cellar, dug by hand, lined with rocks or bricks, or, if you're less lucky, just dirt. But it's below ground, which means it's cool in the summer and oddly temperate in the winter. A constant 50-something degrees Fahrenheit. Not cozy, but not freezing either. So what do? You move in. Not all of you maybe. Maybe just you, the adult who draws the short straw. Or maybe it's the baby with a fever. Maybe it's grandpa who can't stop coughing upstairs. Someone starts sleeping down there. Then another. Then it becomes tradition. You drag a cot in, or a hay mattress, or just a thick wool blanket and some old flour sacks. There's a bottle of plum brandy on the shelf. Not for drinking, not really. You just cradle it warm, like a hot water bottle. It makes a decent pillow substitute once you've stopped noticing how round it is. You lie back. You hear the slow drip of water from a leaky pipe, or the soft scratching of a mouse in the corner. You smell apples, maybe carrots, definitely something pickled. The air is moist, rich, heavy. And against all odds, you sleep. Maybe better than you ever have. No horses clumping by, no children crying upstairs, just the heartbeat of the house itself. Cool stone, slow fermentation, silence. You wake up, and you're not quite sure where you are. The floor above creaks. A bit of dirt's fallen on your brow. There's a beat poking your shoulder. But for one long stretch of night, you were warm. And that was more than most pioneers could ask for. So tonight, we'll follow these cellar sleepers. Not all of them had names, but they left behind barrels, stains, and a strange legacy of finding rest where no one thought to look. You never planned on making wine. But it turns out, when your land's full of grapes and your neighbors are thirsty, destiny has other ideas. It's the 1830s, or the 1860s. Time has a funny way of folding in on itself when you're covered in dust and trying to ferment things. You've got acres of Concord grapes growing wild. Not the elegant French kind. No, these are stubborn little things with thick skins, tart insides, and a tendency to stain everything you love. But they grow like weeds, and in a world where sugar is a luxury and tea feels suspiciously British, grape wine becomes a practical choice. So you dig. A hole at first, then a pit, then gradually a cellar. A proper wine cellar isn't just for show. It's built low, under the house if you can manage it, or off to the side, in a mound of earth that stays chilly no matter what the sun's doing. It's got thick stone walls, or stacked timber with mud chinking. You want it cool, damp, and dark. Which, coincidentally, is also ideal for napping, but we'll come back to that. You start fermenting, not because you're fancy, but because the water from the creek has frogs in it, and beer requires hops you don't have. Wine, on the other hand, well, it's self-starting. Just crush, wait, and hope it doesn't explode. You bottle it in reused glass, cork it with beeswax, and hope. Stack it by flavor, or year, or which family member you don't like. And suddenly, your cellar isn't just a storage space, it's a sanctuary. Now here's where the memory keeping begins. You start writing things. Not journals necessarily, but scribbles. On wooden racks, on the wall beams. 1844, good harvest, cold winter. Or, Edna sick again, doctor says root tea. Bits of your life get buried with the barrels. A wine cellar becomes a time capsule, a quiet archive. And when things get overwhelming upstairs, kids screaming, roof leaking, in-laws arriving, you slip downstairs to check the vinegar. But really, you just sit there, in the hush, breathing in the silence of fermenting grapes and earthen walls. Historians still argue whether these cellars were more about utility or psychology. Were they escape hatches, makeshift storm shelters, emotional bunkers for overworked settlers? One thing's for sure, they were more than just fridges. And if you were tired, bone tired, you'd find a spot. Maybe it was the earth floor, swept smooth by years of foot traffic. Maybe it was an old barrel turned sideways and padded with a coat. Maybe you didn't plan to sleep there at all. You just drifted off. Outside, the wind howled through the prairie. The fire upstairs crackled, barely reaching this deep. But down here, it was just you, and the grapes, and maybe a possum. One early settler, a widow in Iowa, wrote in her letter, "My sons take the cellar in winter. They say the cold there is gentler than upstairs." Another account from Oregon mentions a man who built a stone chamber specifically for napping, calling it his memory vault. And maybe that's the secret. The cellar didn't just store food or ferment wine. It stored peace. It kept people's past bottled neatly beside their present. It whispered back to them, through mold and moss and the scent of slowly aging fruit, that the world above could pause, just for a while. So, when you think of cellars now, don't just think of cobwebs and damp socks. Think hush. Think of barrels holding more than wine. Think of sleep, deep, heavy, undisturbed. You said, continue. Section 3. You're still underground. At this point, it's almost starting to feel like home. The earthen smell is no longer foreign, it's a comfort. That mingling scent of soil, old stone, and something vaguely yeasty has woven itself into your idea of safety. You've stopped noticing the occasional drip from the low ceiling or the tiny footsteps of mice that share the space with you. They're just part of the ambiance now. But what you start to notice, truly notice, is how different the world feels when you're not surrounded by ticking clocks and clanking dinner plates. Down here, time seems to puddle instead of flow. And in that puddle, memory grows like moss. Which brings us to the next curious thing about your 19th century cellar. It wasn't just a place to store wine or sneak naps. It became a sort of memory palace, a mental filing cabinet wrapped in stone and sweat. See, you didn't always have a diary. Paper was expensive, and ink smelled suspiciously like squid. You're still underground. At this point, it's almost starting to feel like home. The earthen smell is no longer foreign. It's a comfort. That mingling scent of soil, old stone, and something vaguely yeasty has woven itself into your idea of safety. You've stopped noticing the occasional drip from the low ceiling or the tiny footsteps of mice that share the space with you. They're just part of the ambiance now. But what you start to notice, truly notice, is how different the world feels when you're not surrounded by ticking clocks and clanking dinner plates. Down here, time seems to puddle instead of flow, and in that puddle, memory grows like moss. Which brings us to the next curious thing about your 19th century cellar. It wasn't just a place to store wine or sneak naps. It became a sort of memory palace, a mental filing cabinet wrapped in stone and sweat. See, you couldn't always have a diary. Paper was expensive, and ink smelled suspiciously like squid. But your brain, that was free, and it needed somewhere quiet to stretch out. Roman generals, believe it or not, were famous for a trick called the method of loci. They'd memorize long speeches by imagining each sentence as an item placed in a room of their mental mansion. Historians still debate whether this technique originated in Greece, Rome, or even earlier, perhaps with wandering storytellers who remembered tales by walking through imagined landscapes. But you're not delivering a speech in the forum. You're just trying to remember whether you fed the chickens this morning. So you use what you have. One barrel equals deaths owed. A shelf of bottles equals birthdays. That chipped brick near the back, that's where you keep the memory of your mother's laugh. It sounds silly until it doesn't. Until you find yourself recalling things better down here. Because the wine cellar isn't just cold, it's consistent. And in a life full of blizzards, babies, and blistered hands, consistency is a luxury. There's an account from a farmer in Pennsylvania, written in that jagged cursive that used back then, describing how he remembered the Psalms better when standing beside the pickle jars. Another from a pioneer woman in Kansas who said her husband never forgot their anniversary, as long as he fetched the onions. Even the lighting helped. A single oil lamp in a pitch-black cellar doesn't just illuminate your path, it highlights only what you want to focus on, like a spotlight for your thoughts, or an accidental meditation practice years before anyone named it that. And then there's the wine itself. Some say moderate alcohol helped loosen the mind, making it easier to retrieve memories. Others argue the opposite, that sleep and silence were the real tools. Either way, sipping from a bottle labeled 1849 First Frost had a way of anchoring your recollection. Historians still argue whether memory was better in the past, or if people just needed it more. No phone to remind you of Uncle Joe's barn raising, no cloud to save your to-do list, no podcast to play in the background while you scrubbed the floor. Just your mind and the cellar. And you didn't memorize just for yourself. Oh no. Your head was a library, a backup drive for the whole family. You remembered which cousin lost a tooth by the cider barrel, which storm took down the east fence, which pie recipe called for nutmeg, and which for sassafras. Because if you forgot it, no one else was going to remember for you. There's even a story, likely more folklore than fact, of an elderly pioneer man who could walk his grandchildren through his entire life using nothing but the objects in his root cellar. "See that crack?" he'd say. "That's from the earthquake in '72. I was eating apples when it hit." You're not quite there yet, but give it time. For now, you shift slightly on your makeshift bench. The cold from the ground has settled into your spine, but it's not unpleasant. It's a reminder that this place is still holding you, still keeping your thoughts safe, still bottling moments you didn't even realize were memories yet. Like the quiet you're feeling now, like the sleep that's beginning to sneak into your limbs, like the cellar gently whispering, "You don't have to remember everything tonight, just enough." You're still here. Still nestled among the dusty bottles, old crates, and the odd potato sprouting in defiance of darkness. The air has thickened just slightly, warmer now, as if your presence has stirred the room's old bones into remembering you too. Above ground, the sun has likely dipped into its usual gold, that soft pre-twilight glow where chickens begin their retreat and the last log is tossed onto the hearth. But down here, time behaves differently, less like a line, more like a spiral. You begin to recall how the Romans, those masters of empire and engineering, used their underground spaces not only for storage, but for focus. In their sprawling villas, the cellars weren't just practical, they were almost sacred. Soundproof, shadowed, safe. A place where a senator might practice a speech, or a scholar might compose thoughts between sips of dark wine and the echo of his own breath. Centuries later, without togas or laurels, you're participating in the same ritual. Only instead of Cicero's oratory, you're silently listing the names of every animal you've ever owned, alphabetically, by temperament. It soothes you more than any hymn. Because memory, it turns out, likes silence. Neuroscientists today, armed with blinking machines and coffee-fueled interns, tell us the brain consolidates memory best when it's quiet, when it's removed from stimulus, when it's allowed to breathe. Pioneers, farmers, lighthouse keepers, bakers all discovered this without the help of a peer-reviewed journal. They just knew instinctively that below the bustle was a better place to think. Maybe because you're closer to the earth, or maybe because it's the one place your thoughts don't have to compete with weather, wagons, or other people's opinions. There's a letter from a lighthouse keeper in 1884, stationed far up the coast of Maine, who described memorizing poetry not at his desk, but in the pantry, next to the vinegar barrels. "Too many windows upstairs," he wrote, "too many gulls. Down here, it's just me and Longfellow." Even the architecture agreed. Stone walls don't echo the way wooden ones do. Low ceilings encourage hunching, humility. And tiny windows, if there are any at all, let in light like it's a secret. You learn to appreciate the small flickers. They become enough. And here's something charming you've noticed lately. Your dreams are changing. They've become simpler, quieter, less about cities, more about leaves. Less about missed appointments, more about remembered faces. You dream in root vegetables now, in rusted hinges, in the grain of oak shelves. Could it be that the cellar has slowed your thoughts just enough to let the gentle ones in? You start to imagine your brain as a little subterranean chamber of its own, with drawers labeled First Snowfall and Softest Laugh. A mental wine rack of old moments, each vintage with its own odd bouquet, like the 1876 jar of peach preserves that still reminds you of your sister's wedding. Even the cobwebs have started to feel curatorial, like nature's own catalog system. And maybe that's the odd gift of the cellar, after all. Not just storage for things, but for selves. A place where you're not a worker, or a parent, or a member of any committee. You're just you, unwrapping memory like cheesecloth from something worth keeping. You glance to your right. One jar is missing a label, a mystery. And yet in your mind, you know it was from that summer, the one with the unusually large pumpkins. Your fingers instinctively hover over the glass, and suddenly you remember. That was the year your cousin got engaged, and someone danced barefoot in the field. It's odd what the brain retains. Odd and beautiful. So you stay a little longer. Not because you need to, not because the upstairs world is unkind, but because down here you are uninterrupted. And in this century, or any century, that's as rare as moonlight in a bottle. Let your memory breathe. Let your thoughts float up through the stillness like dandelion seeds. Let the cellar hold them like it always has.
And let sleep start to gently tug at your shoulder, reminding you the past is
Stillness. That's the word that finds you next. You don't hear it, of course. It isn't spoken aloud. But it settles around you like the way dust drapes a forgotten book, gently, without announcement. You blink slower. Even your thoughts start to stretch out, yawning like cats in sunlight. Stillness has a history too, and it's older than we give it credit for. The earliest cave dwellers, if we peel back the centuries and imagine their lives not in grunts and spears, but in rhythms and rests, likely knew the value of silence. Not just to avoid predators, but to commune with memory, mystery, and maybe even something like hope. Archaeologists have found ancient cave markings in places so deep, so acoustically insulated, that they suggest more than just shelter. They suggest sacredness, focus, contemplation. You run your fingers absent-mindedly along the rim of the nearby jug. The cool ceramic surface feels like time made tangible, like the century never ended, just folded in on itself, waiting for a hand like yours to find it again. And it reminds you of those curious stories from early American homesteads, how certain cellars were designed not only for storage, but for listening. That's right, listening. Some families believed that by placing your ear to the stone floor in a specific corner, you could hear the creak of tree roots moving, or the whisper of underground springs. And in those moments, beneath the weight of the world, you might learn something, not through words, but through patience. Today, we'd call it mindfulness. Back then, it was just being. Of course, not everyone understood. In one little Pennsylvania township, there's a diary entry from 1859 in which a widowed schoolteacher describes being teased by her brother-in-law for napping in the cellar. He called it peculiar, she wrote, but I swear my dreams taste clearer down there, as though each one has been rinsed clean. That phrase sticks with you now. Dreams that taste clearer. What a marvelous thought. And maybe that's what this space is giving you. Not just sleep, but clarity. Not just escape, but an invitation back into something more essential, more distilled. Down here, your memories arrive without their usual disguises. They don't need to shout. They don't rush. They simply present themselves, like guests at a quiet dinner, bearing soft stories and warm bread. You remember the worn pages of that old gardening book you once found in a market bin, how its margins were filled with someone else's handwriting, gentle reminders like "Don't forget the marigolds" and "Be kinder to the beans this year." You never did find out who wrote them, but sometimes in the cellar you feel like they're near, like your breath and theirs have mingled in the same cool air. There's comfort in that. There's comfort in so many things, really. The even spacing of the shelves, the symmetrical rows of pickled things, all sealed and waiting. The muted sound of your own heartbeat, which now seems to echo just a little bit louder, or maybe you're simply listening better. This is what the pioneers understood, and the lighthouse keepers, and the early monks who carved out prayer cells beneath cathedrals, that depth brings stillness, and stillness, in its unassuming way, brings a sort of truth. So go ahead, sink into it. No rush, no deadlines. You are under no obligation to make this moment anything other than what it is: quiet, honest, soft. Let your breath slow further. Let your eyes rest where they fall, on a Tim label, a spider's silken thread, a crack in the stone that looks a little like a river. And know this: down here, in the silence, your thoughts are safe. Your memories are heard. And you, dearest listener, are exactly where you need to be. The sound you hear next is almost nothing. A sigh of air sneaking between floorboards, a gentle crackle of wood settling into its age. But down here, every sound is magnified by stillness. You hear like a fox would, ears twitching to catch stories carried in the breath of the earth. You're not alone, not really, never were, because just above your head, And sometimes in these very rooms, the pioneers left behind more than tools and dusty jars. They left habits. Old, worn, almost forgotten rituals of memory-keeping that centered, surprisingly, around cellars like this. In some parts of early New England, it was believed that the coolest part of the house, often the root cellar, preserved not just food, but thoughts. Thoughts written down, on scraps of paper, old prayer cards, even receipts. These were tucked behind loose stones or slid into slits in support beams. They were called rememberings. Historians argue whether this practice was religious, superstitious, or simply sentimental. But what's certain is that people did it, and they often revisited the same hiding spots in old age, as if returning to consult an earlier version of themselves. And yes, some pioneers slept down here, not just for the cool in summer or the warmth in winter, but for the privacy, a sanctuary beneath the weight of chores and kin and clatter. In the hush of the cellar, they could gather their minds like scattered grain. You find yourself imagining one of them now. A man named Elias, maybe. 43, maybe 58. The lines on his face carved deeper than his years should allow. His wife long gone. His children loud. And after supper, when the hearth has gone dim and the last pot has been scrubbed, Elias takes a blanket and his worn ledger and climbs down into the cellar. He doesn't light the lamp. He doesn't need to. He knows every corner by feel. The hollow where the carrots are stacked. The patch of floor that's always slightly damp. The beam where he tucks his daily thought. And tonight's is simple. Don't forget the kindness of silence. You don't know if he means the absence of sound or the mercy of holding back words that might wound. Either way, the message floats, preserved in the same cool air you breathe now. It's humbling, isn't it? To think of all the tiny decisions made in this space. Which jar to open first? Which dream to carry into morning? Which memory to seal and which to bury? You shift slightly, feeling the dirt floor cool against your back. Somewhere above, a floorboard creaks. Old houses never sleep all the way. But down here, your thoughts slow to match the room. There's something vaguely magical about the smell, too. Not perfume, not rot. Something in between. The soft must of stone and time, like an old library book wrapped in a wool blanket. You close your eyes again and wonder what memory you'd hide behind a beam. A summer morning with your grandmother's hands on yours, showing you how to knead dough. The first time you saw the ocean and it didn't scare you. Or maybe something quieter. The moment you forgave yourself for a thing no one else knew about. They'd live here well, those memories. The cellar wouldn't judge. It would just keep them. And that's the lesson, maybe, that these cellar sleepers left behind. That sometimes the best place to hold memory is somewhere the world can't reach. Not because you're hiding it, but because it deserves a softer place to live. So rest now, in their stillness. Eli would be glad for the company. He'd nod once, offer you a seat on a folded burlap sack, and go back to scratching his thoughts in pencil on the last clean corner of the ledger. Above, the world goes on. Boots thump, wind tugs at shutters, a clock chimes for no one in particular. But here, time folds in on itself like the gentle press of linen. And you, curious traveler, are no longer just a visitor. You are part of the cellar's long breath, part of its hush, part of its memory.
The rhythm of the cellar wraps around you now, soft and lulling. You begin to understand why someone might choose this place, not just for food storage or secret thoughts, but for sleep itself. Historians often puzzle over the odd sleeping habits of pioneers. Why not the feather bed upstairs? Why not near the fire or beside the stove in winter? But records, journals, and quietly detailed probate inventories hint that certain individuals, often elders, sometimes solitary widows or aging uncles, preferred the earth-cooled hush below ground. Was it for comfort, for quiet, or was there something deeper, a connection to memory, to rest, to the ancient wisdom of the earth itself? The Romans had a phrase for it, sub terra pax, peace under the earth. And while they meant it mostly for tombs and crypts, the sentiment might have whispered itself into pioneer minds too. You imagine again, a woman this time, Ruth perhaps, 67, wiry and wide-eyed, with hands like braided rope and a voice like cracked honey. Her children have moved west. Her husband's been gone a decade. She minds the house alone, and with the courage born of repetition, she tends the garden, feeds the chickens, and, each evening, descends into her cellar with a quilt and a folded letter. Not just any letter, the one from her eldest son, written in the spring of '74, from Kansas. "Mama, the wheat took this year," it reads. "We'll eat. I think of your apple preserves every morning." That letter lives in a tin box on a high shelf in the cellar, not for display, not for sentiment, for safety. And because when she sleeps near it, she dreams more vividly. Dreams of his voice, of wheat, of the smell of her apples stewing on the stove. Some say the cellar dreams are the most powerful, that being cradled by earth tunes your mind to quieter frequencies, the ones where memory and spirit speak freely. There's no research for that, of course, no peer-reviewed papers from the University of Candlelight and Creaking Floorboards, but the anecdotal evidence is rich. Letters, diaries, even oral histories pass down like whispered bedtime songs. And when you lie here long enough, you start to feel it too, the way your own thoughts stretch, slow, and unravel like old twine, no longer knotted, no longer rushed. Ruth might say, if she could sit beside you now, "The quiet down here isn't empty. It's just full of things we forgot to hear." And she'd be right. Because listen closely, and the cellar speaks. It tells you about the potatoes harvested too early that still managed to grow soft and sweet. About the night the raccoons tried to pry up the trapdoor. About the time someone brought down a harmonica and played 3 full songs before falling asleep right on the packed earth. You wonder if that's why you're so comfortable here, because the ground remembers music. In a strange way, this cellar is like a memory palace, not one made of marble halls and gilded doors like the ancient Greeks envisioned, but of shelves, root bins, and softly weeping walls. And in each corner, a small moment waits to be recalled. A scent, a phrase, a tiny decision that shaped a life. Even now, you feel your body giving in to the rhythm of the place, that slow exhale of history. The cellar doesn't ask anything of you, doesn't hurry your thoughts. It simply holds them. Above, someone or something has placed a jar back on the shelf too hard. A muffled thump. You don't startle. The cellar expects such sounds. It eats them, gently. You turn on your side, eyes half-lidded now, and think once more of Ruth's tin box, of Eli's pencil marks, of the nameless others who sought rest not in beds, but in quiet. You begin to see the wisdom in it. The earth, after all, was the first bed, before frames, before mattresses, before nightlights and duvets, just soft earth and the sound of one's own breath echoing gently off stone. Perhaps, in the end, all we ever need is a place where time folds gently around us, where the night is a companion, not a threat. And for a few lucky pioneers, that place was the cellar. You smile into the darkness and let yourself drift. The hush grows thicker now, as if even your thoughts are padded in wool. The cellar's rhythm no longer hums beneath you. It flows through you like groundwater, slow and sure. There's something curious about how memory is kept in places like this, not preserved in amber, but steeped like tea in the cool, damp air. It's not just the body that rests here, it's the mind that lets go. You picture another figure from the 1800s. Maybe it's a man this time, a retired sea captain named Elias, weathered and lean, with a beard gone white and hands that still smell faintly of rope and salt. He's traded his place at the helm for a farmhouse inland, away from crashing waves, but never fully away from solitude. They say Elias sleeps in his root cellar not out of necessity, but by choice. He once told the postmaster that he prefers the smell, that the air's honest down there. And it is. earth, wood, a faint tang of onions maybe, but honest. It wasn't unusual in those days for older men to seek quietude. Some built small cabins behind their homes. Some lived in attics. But the cellar? That was rare. Elias, though, insisted it helped his memory. "Memories don't like the sunlight," he once said to a neighbor's child. "Too bright, and they scatter like gulls." So he kept a cot down there, a little oil lamp, a book of psalms, and something strange, the children noted, a logbook, not of ship routes or tides, but of dreams, dreamed at sea, dreamed in the cellar, side by side. Historians love objects like that. They speak louder than letters. Elias's logbook, should anyone find it now, would read more like poetry than record. August 14. Dreamed I was climbing a rope made of sea foam. October 3. Saw my mother's face in a pail of rainwater. He knew the dreams wouldn't last forever, but writing them down gave them weight. And sleeping in the cellar, close to the past, close to the earth, seemed to make them richer. Some scholars have mused that older folks of the 19th century sought such places not just for peace, but for continuity. The world above shifted rapidly. Railroads, telegraphs, factories. But the cellar? The cellar didn't change. The potatoes stayed where they were put. The apples softened slowly. The stone never asked questions. There is a kind of sanctuary in sameness. And so Elias stayed, until one winter night he simply didn't come back up. The townsfolk mourned him with quiet respect. When they cleared out the cellar, they found everything exactly as he left it. The cot, the psalms, the dream log. And on the last page, written in a shaky but steady hand, "Tonight I sleep under deeper stars." You wonder now, lying here in imagined shadow, if he's right. Maybe there are deeper stars, not in the sky, but beneath us. Stars that guide the memory inward, not outward. Not constellations to navigate oceans, but constellations of thought, regret, and wonder. This idea makes you drowsy in a different way. Not just sleepy, but softened. Pliable like clay warmed by a hearth. You feel yourself becoming part of the story, not just the listener, but the inheritor of a very old wisdom. That sometimes when the world gets too fast, too bright, too noisy, you go down. Down into the earth, down into the quiet, down into the places where dreams hold still long enough to be remembered. The cellar holds you now, the same way it once held Ruth and Elias and so many nameless, ordinary souls who just needed a place to rest and maybe, if they were lucky, to remember. You shift slightly, not to wake but to settle in deeper. Your breath joins the rhythm of the place, soft, measured, like footsteps far above, faded by time. And somewhere, in the corner of your own cellar of thought, a memory stirs. You let it, because here you are safe to remember, and safe to forget.
The cold stone walls around you seem to breathe softly, as if they're whispering secrets kept through countless winters. You imagine those walls have heard more stories than any tavern in town. Tales folded into the damp air like invisible ink. Now, think about how the pioneers managed their sleep cycles. Life was tied tightly to the sun. No glow of streetlights, no hum of electronics. But there was more to their rest than just sunset and sunrise. Some settlers practiced what we now call segmented sleep, 2 distinct phases, with a quiet wakefulness in between. The first sleep came with dusk, deep and dream-filled. Then, around midnight, they'd wake for an hour or so, reading, praying, chatting, before slipping back into a second slumber until dawn. It sounds odd now, right? The idea of waking in the middle of the night, not to scroll your phone or binge watch, but to simply be awake, present and reflective.
Historians still argue whether segmented sleep was a cultural artifact or a biological norm for humans before modern light disrupted natural rhythms. But the pioneers seemed to embrace it as practical, especially in harsh winters when the night stretched long and cold. You might picture a family huddled by the fire in that wakeful hour, sharing hushed stories or planning the next day's chores. Perhaps the mother mended clothes while the children listened, eyes heavy but minds alight. The quiet between sleeps wasn't empty. It was a sacred pause, a time for slow thoughts and soft connections. Down here in your imagined cellar, that pause feels close. The silence fills with gentle possibility. You almost hear the scratch of a quill on parchment or the faint crackle of embers. It's a different rhythm than the frantic hustle you know today, a rhythm that honors rest as a layered thing, not just a block of unconsciousness. Maybe there's wisdom there. Maybe that middle hour was where the mind did its softest sorting, like a gentle librarian tidying up the day's stories. And you, lying in the quiet dark, might try it yourself. Not fighting the waking, not chasing distraction, just lying back, listening to the silence between heartbeats, breathing in the coolness that the cellar holds like a secret. The pioneers' sleep may have seemed boring to the hurried world outside their cabins, but in that boredom lived a kind of peace, the kind that doesn't shout for attention, but settles quietly, like moss on old stone. So if you find yourself stirring tonight, don't reach for your phone or your worries. Instead, savor the stillness. Let it fold you into its slow embrace. After all, history teaches us, sometimes, the most ordinary things, like how we sleep, hold the deepest comfort. The chill in the cellar seems to deepen as you settle further into the silence. You can almost feel the rough texture of the wooden beams overhead, aged and darkened by time and smoke. Imagine the pioneers downstairs, tucked away from winter's bite, their breaths mingling with the faint aroma of earth and aged wine barrels. Now, let's talk about a peculiar practice some early settlers adopted to improve their sleep in these underground refuges: the use of natural sleep aids like herbal mixtures. Lavender, valerian root, and hops were often brewed into teas or tucked into small sachets placed under pillows. These plants weren't just pleasant smells, they were subtle helpers nudging the mind toward rest. One unusual tidbit: some pioneers believed that keeping a sprig of rosemary nearby could help sharpen memory even during sleep. Rosemary, known as the herb of remembrance, was a common companion in both the kitchen and the bedroom. It was said that inhaling its scent during sleep could bring clarity to dreams and preserve mental sharpness. Whether true or just hopeful folklore, it was a ritual embraced with faith. Historians still debate how widespread such herbal practices really were and how effective they might have been. There's evidence of herbal remedies in many cultures, but how much they truly influenced sleep quality is murky. Some argue that the placebo effect, or simply the calming act of ritual itself, played the larger role. You might picture a pioneer carefully brewing their nighttime tea, the steam rising like a gentle ghost, or a small bundle of dried herbs hanging above a doorway, swaying softly in the cellar's draft. These sensory details matter. They anchor us to a time when sleep wasn't just a passive state, but a cared-for craft. And here you are now, wrapped in a similar quietude, maybe with your own faint scent nearby, a candle, a cup of tea, or simply the cool air. The layers of history fold around you as naturally as the dark folds the night sky. This is more than just sleep. It's a communion with the slow rhythms that shaped lives long before your own. And as you breathe in this calm, the cellar and its secrets seem less like a forgotten past and more like a gentle invitation to rest deeper. The pioneers might have been buried under stone walls and cold earth, but their wisdom, hidden in these simple, slow moments, still hums softly beneath the surface. The cold stone floor beneath you seems to hold the weight of countless footsteps, heavy boots, soft slippers, and bare feet alike, all echoing through the quiet cellar halls. Imagine those footsteps belong to pioneers preparing for a long winter night, their routines as predictable as the ticking of a clock. One interesting sleep secret from these early settlers was their surprisingly modern approach to controlling the sleep environment. Long before there were smart thermostats or blackout curtains, pioneers used practical methods to keep their sleeping spaces cool, dark, and quiet. Thick woolen blankets served as insulation against the chill, while heavy curtains and shutters blocked the moonlight that could disrupt rest. They even positioned their beds strategically, away from drafts but near fresh air vents, such as a small window cracked just enough to let in a whisper of the outside world. The careful balance of warmth and ventilation was crucial because stuffy air could lead to restless nights, while too much cold could be just as disruptive. Quirky detail: some settlers placed a bowl of water near their beds, believing it would absorb negative energy or restless spirits, reflecting a blend of practical and superstitious beliefs. It's a reminder that sleep, even in those straightforward times, was touched by folklore as much as by necessity. Historians continue to debate how widespread such beliefs were and to what extent they genuinely influenced sleep quality. Did the water bowls actually calm restless minds, or were they simply comforting rituals passed down from old-world traditions? No one can say for sure, but the practice hints at how intertwined cultural habits and sleep were. You might imagine yourself there in the dark, the water bowl's surface still and reflective, catching the faint light of a flickering candle. The atmosphere is thick with quiet reverence for the night and the promise of rest. As you breathe in this imagined cellar air, remember the pioneers weren't just surviving, they were crafting their nights carefully, weaving a web of warmth, comfort, and belief to hold them through the long hours of darkness. And maybe, just maybe, some of that care seeps into your own quiet moments now, helping you drift deeper into sleep. The dampness in the cellar clings softly to your skin, a reminder of the ever-present moisture trapped beneath the earth. Imagine the settlers checking their surroundings by the faint flicker of oil lamps, making sure their food stores and precious barrels of wine remain safe through the long winter months. Their nights were spent in this quiet, shadowy world, simultaneously a refuge and a reminder of isolation. A fascinating practice for preserving not just food but also mental peace was the use of rhythmic routines before sleep. Settlers often followed a pattern of calming activities, simple prayers, humming familiar tunes, or softly telling stories by the firelight. This rhythm helped signal to the brain that it was time to shift from the worries of the day into the peaceful embrace of rest. Here's a quirky little detail. Some pioneers swore by dream stones, small, smooth pebbles kept under pillows or in pockets. These stones were believed to protect against nightmares and encourage pleasant dreams. While the idea sounds charmingly quaint, it highlights how sleep was considered sacred and sometimes vulnerable, needing all the protection one could muster. Historians still argue about how much such rituals truly influenced the mental well-being of these early Americans. Was the comfort from these practices purely psychological, or did they foster genuine improvements in sleep quality and emotional health? The evidence is scarce but intriguing. Picture yourself reaching down to touch one of those dream stones, feeling its smooth coolness as your mind unwinds. The cellar's shadows seem less foreboding, more like an old friend guiding you softly toward rest. The pioneers' quiet nights in their underground havens weren't just about surviving the cold, they were about crafting a safe, nurturing space for the mind and body to recover. And as you settle deeper into your own night's rest, you carry with you a faint echo of those whispered lullabies and protective stones, a gentle bridge connecting past and present. The scent of damp earth and aged wood surrounds you as you imagine the settlers' careful preparations for night. In the flickering glow of candlelight, the rustle of fabric and the soft creak of wooden beds frame the stillness settling over the cellar. Outside, the wind howls against stone walls, but inside, the pioneers embrace a ritual of restfulness. One intriguing historical tidbit: some early Americans used what we might now call white noise techniques to ease their minds. They would deliberately keep a small fire crackling or place a slow-dripping water source nearby to create a steady, soothing sound. This constant background noise helped drown out the occasional creak or groan of the old house and the sometimes unsettling silence of the cellar. Here's a quirky detail: some pioneers believed that the sound of an owl hooting at night was a protective call, warding off evil spirits. Others thought it an ominous sign. Sleep superstitions were varied and colorful. Whether comforting or unsettling, these beliefs shaped the nighttime atmosphere profoundly. Historians still debate how much these auditory cues genuinely affected sleep quality or were merely comforting or anxiety-inducing myths. Did the crackling fire truly help settle restless minds, or was it just a charming quirk of pioneer life? The truth may be lost beneath centuries of quiet nights. Imagine yourself there, the steady pob and crackle of the fire mixing with the occasional distant hoot. Your breathing slows, matching the rhythm of the sounds, as your thoughts begin to drift like leaves on a gentle stream. The settlers understood that sleep wasn't just about darkness and silence. It was about feeling safe, soothed, and connected to the world's quieter rhythms. And now, as your own eyelids grow heavy, you carry with you the ancient comfort of those steady sounds, lulling you toward a peaceful, restful night. The chill in the cellar air is balanced by the warmth of a thick woolen blanket wrapped around you. You can almost feel the rough yet comforting texture against your skin, a reminder of the careful craftsmanship and resourcefulness that shaped pioneer life. As the night deepens, the steady flicker of the lantern casts dancing shadows on the stone walls, creating a soothing, hypnotic rhythm. One practical but fascinating strategy pioneers used was to position their beds near earthen walls. The thick stone helped regulate temperature, keeping the sleeper cooler in summer and warmer in winter. This natural insulation was an early form of climate control born from observation and necessity rather than technology. Here's a quirky detail: some settlers believed that sleeping with their feet pointed toward the door invited bad luck or restless spirits. So, they made sure to tuck their toes away, turning their bodies just so. Tiny superstitions mingled with practical sleeping arrangements. Here's a quirky detail: some historians debate how much these customs influenced pioneer sleep hygiene. Was this foot direction superstition a widely held belief or a regional quirk? And did the proximity to stone walls really impact sleep quality? Or is this just an interesting coincidence? Imagine yourself nestled close to the cool stone, your body adjusting to the subtle changes in temperature. The steady hum of the cellar, the drip of water, the occasional creak, blends into a gentle lullaby. The pioneers' careful attention to their sleeping environment shows a deep understanding of rest's importance, even when faced with hardship and isolation. And as you sink further into your own comfort, you carry with you the echoes of these simple yet effective practices, inviting a night of deep, restorative sleep. The cellar grows quieter as the night stretches on, and you feel the weight of centuries settling softly around you. Imagine the settlers lying awake for moments, listening to the rhythms of their small world. The faint drip of condensation, the rustle of settling wood, the distant call of a night bird. These subtle sounds were the lullabies of an age before screens and white noise machines. A quirky detail: some pioneers used herbal sachets, little bundles of lavender, chamomile, or valerian root placed under their pillows to encourage restful sleep. These natural remedies, passed down through generations, were early attempts to coax the mind into calmness without modern medicine. Historians still argue about how effective these herbs were and whether their use was widespread or limited to certain families or regions. The interplay between folk medicine and emerging scientific knowledge created a patchwork of sleep practices, rich with tradition and experimentation. Now, imagine inhaling the faint scent of dried herbs mingling with the earthy smell of stone and wood. Your breath slows, your muscles relax, and you drift gently, carried by the timeless rhythms of the cellar. The pioneers knew well that rest was not merely physical, it was a renewal of spirit and mind, essential to face the uncertainties of dawn. And as your own thoughts soften, you carry forward the legacy of those quiet nights, tucked safely in the embrace of history's gentle hands. The faintest glimmer of dawn begins to filter through a tiny cellar window, dust motes dancing in the cool morning light. Outside, the world slowly stirs to life. The first bird song, the distant clatter of tools, the soft murmur of waking neighbors. But inside, the cellar remains a quiet refuge, a cocoon where the pioneers completed their nightly journey into rest. An interesting historical fact, many settlers woke before sunrise to make the most of daylight, especially during harsh winters when daylight hours were limited. Their sleep schedules were closely tied to natural light patterns, a practice modern science now calls circadian rhythm. This synchronization helped them conserve energy and maintain mental clarity throughout grueling days. Here's a charming tidbit. Some pioneers reportedly greeted the dawn by stepping outside barefoot onto the cold earth, believing it grounded them and brought renewed energy for the day ahead. It was a kind of ritual cleansing, connecting body and mind with the Earth's natural pulse. Historians still debate whether these early morning routines were universally practiced or more personalized habits shaped by local customs and individual beliefs. The balance between necessity, tradition, and personal preference made pioneer life endlessly varied. Now, as you imagine yourself rising with the pale light, stretching and stepping softly onto the cool ground, you carry with you the enduring wisdom of those who lived close to nature's rhythms. Let the gentle promise of dawn ease you toward waking, carrying the calm and quiet strength of the cellar into your day.
The sun now peaks fully over the horizon, casting golden light through your imagined cellar window. You feel the shift in the air as the house above begins to stir. The soft footsteps, the clink of breakfast preparations, and the quiet murmur of morning greetings. The cellar, once a place of retreat and rest, now becomes a foundation of the day's activities. One practical detail, pioneers often used the coolness of the cellar not just for sleep, but to store food and wine, a dual-purpose space that required balancing preservation and comfort. This multifunctionality added a layer of complexity to how they designed and lived within these humble homes. Here's a quirky story. Some settlers believed that if you slept too long in the cellar, your body would become too cold, leading to sluggishness and poor health. So, while the cellar offered a perfect sleep environment, there was a superstition urging moderation. Too much coolness was not good for you. Historians still debate the influence of such beliefs on actual behaviors. Did fear of becoming too cold limit how often settlers used the cellar for sleeping? Or was this more a tale told to keep people moving and productive? Imagine yourself rising now, carrying the cool calm of the cellar with you as you step into the brighter, warmer world above. The balance between rest and action, between cool quiet and busy day, defines this rhythm of pioneer life. And as you prepare to face your own day, remember the gentle lessons of the cellar, the value of rest, the wisdom of nature's rhythms, and the quiet power of simple traditions. As the day unfolds beyond the cellar's cool walls, you carry with you the echoes of a quieter, slower time. A time when sleep was shaped by the rhythms of nature and the humble comforts of stone and earth. The cellar, with its whispered secrets and cool embrace, reminds you that rest is not just a pause, but a vital thread woven into the fabric of life. Some settlers believed that a good night's sleep in the cellar could strengthen the mind and body, preparing them for the hardships ahead. This belief, though simple, reveals a profound understanding of rest as a source of resilience and renewal. Here's a curious note.
Certain families kept small tokens or charms near their beds, hoping to ward off nightmares or restless spirits. Whether these objects truly affected sleep or simply comforted the mind is still a matter of speculation among historians. As you imagine the cellar once more, the soft hum of night settling in, the steady beat of your own breath mingling with the sounds of history, you feel a deep connection to those pioneers. Their challenges, their rituals, and their quiet wisdom become part of your own journey toward peaceful rest. Now, as you begin to drift away from this story and back into your own world, let the gentle stillness carry you softly into sleep. Remember the cool stone walls, the whispered lullabies of herbs and earth, and the steady heartbeat of history's embrace. Rest well, knowing you walk in the footsteps of those who cherished rest as much as life itself. Slow your breath. Feel the soft pull of night's calm as it wraps around you like a warm, familiar blanket. The world outside fades gently into quiet shadows, leaving only the gentle rhythm of your breath and the soft hum of peaceful dreams. Let your thoughts float freely now, unburdened and light, as the echoes of cellar nights and pioneer wisdom settle deep within. The cool stone, the scent of herbs, the quiet murmur of history, all blend into a lullaby sung by time itself. There's no rush, no urgency, just the soft unfolding of rest, slow and steady, carrying you deeper into sleep's embrace. You are safe here. You are held. Good night, friend. Sweet dreams.